The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
As the gavel came down, Donald Trump entered the history books. It's been just over a year since his first impeachment. This time, Trump was charged with inciting an insurrection after a violent mob stormed the Capitol last week, leaving 5 people dead.
Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to our country, and that once again, we honored our oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States.
10 Republicans voted with the Democrat-led House. The GOP votes were in sharp contrast to the unanimous support for Trump among House Republicans when he was impeached by Democrats in December 2019.
The president's role in this insurrection is undeniable, both on social media ahead of January 6th and in his speech that day. He deliberately promoted baseless theories, creating a combustible environment of misinformation and division.
But other Republicans remained loyal to their boss.
We should be focused on bringing the nation together. Instead, Democrats are going to impeach the president for a second time 1 week before he leaves office. Why? Why? Politics and the fact that they want to cancel the president.
Trump now faces trial in the Senate, but not until after President-elect Joe Biden takes office next week. Shortly after the vote, Trump released a video statement condemning last week's violence, but did not mention impeachment.
I unequivocally condemn the violence that we saw last week. Violence and vandalism have absolutely no place in our country and no place in our movement. Making America great again has always been about defending the rule of law, supporting the men and women of law enforcement, and upholding our nation's most sacred traditions and values.
In the run-up to the inauguration, 20,000 National Guard members are expected to be on duty. Washington, D.C. has been compared to a fortress city rather than the heart of U.S. democracy.
Well, let's find out more and head to Washington, D.C. to speak to our reporter there, Colin Campbell. Colin, a very good morning to you. The final outcome then, no surprise, we anticipated this, but 10 Republicans voting against their president. Why are they breaking away from Trump?
Well, a lot of these Republicans don't feel that that they're in jeopardy with their political agendas. Some of the Republicans who voted with party lines, down party lines, feel very threatened by their electorate, that they could be primaried or voted out of office. These other Republicans, some pundits have talked about, are bold, they're courageous, and some of them don't face that same political liability that their other compatriots have. But what we have to do is also look at the reasons why they said that they wanted to vote with Democrats in this impeachment, for example. When you have the third highest ranking Republican in the House, Liz Cheney, for example, she talked about how the president broke an oath to keep America safe and how he was dangerous to the American public because of inciting an insurrection, which is what the article of impeachment was over. So when you look at these Republicans, some of them are voting because of their principles. Some of them are voting because it is something that they feel that they can do without facing political peril. And then others are looking at just the whole scope of how significant this was for a president to face impeachment for a second time and why.
Well, let me ask you exactly about that, Colin, because it is a historic first for a president to be impeached twice. Still, he's not going to be removed from office. So is it significant? What happens next?
Yeah, Rosie, this is still very significant, even though he may not be removed from office because he only has a few days left. What Democrats really want to do is try to prevent him from running from office again. And if we remember, the president he actually started his re-election campaign on his inauguration day. The month leading up to next week, the president talked about a possible run for re-election, or a possible run again, rather, in 2024. And so Democrats are saying, listen, enough is enough. We want to put a stop to this. And they believe that impeaching him a second time, and then when the incoming Senate comes in and tries to convict him, it could prevent him from running for office ever again, because that is what will be written into this article of impeachment when the Senate comes in to convict.
There is still a lot of anger amongst some Trump supporters, and the FBI is warning that violent militia might be targeting next week's inauguration. How worried and how concerned are authorities about that event?
Yeah, not just authorities are concerned, Rosie, but many people around Washington are concerned. There seems to be so many levels of just how this operation was possibly planned out and how it was orchestrated that implicates members of law enforcement. So when there are threats about rallies all over the nation and how there could be targets and protests, demonstrations, and possible mini insurrections across the country in the 50 capitals across the states, there's a large reason for concern there. And then when you look at possibly if there are law enforcement officers that are playing a role in all of this, the concern and the anxiety grows even more. So FBI officials, the security officials, they're checking video, they're looking at recordings, they're checking thousands upon thousands of tips to try to prevent anything from happening like this again. Right now, we have the National Guard. There are more troops here representing the National Guard in Washington, D.C. downtown than there are in some of the major countries around the world that have U.S. Military troops there. Maybe the top three in Afghanistan, Iraq. There are more National Guard troops here than overseas. Rosie?
Thank you very much, Colin Campbell, our reporter there in Washington, D.C. Well, let's find out a little bit more, particularly about the public reaction to this. Joining us now is James Connor, a spokesperson for Republicans overseas in Ireland. He joins us now from Limerick. Thank you very much for your time. What do you make of the fact that 10 Republicans decided to vote with the Democrats to impeach President Trump?
Well, I think, I think your correspondent there was pretty spot on with some of his points. The Republicans may be feeling some heat from their constituents. If I'm not mistaken, some of them are actually from fairly liberal states. As far as Liz Cheney, I mean, she, by blood is part of the Bush-Cheney, family, and there's definitely no love lost there between that family and the Trump family. So the fact that they parted, whatever reasons they had, they went with them, but I think that it's going to cause them some issues when the primaries come up in a couple years.
Do you think the president deserves some kind of rebuke for his actions last week?
Not at all. In fact, I got up early this morning to make sure that I had all my information correct because it's coming in so fast. But if you look at some very non-Trump friendly reporting from CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, none of them really indicate anything that he did wrong. In fact, as your correspondent previously stated, the FBI had concerns about a planned attack at the Capitol. So therefore, if it was already planned, and CNN has even said this as well, the president can't incite something that's already planned. Now, there is a lot of questions that need to be answered, as far as how the people got in there. People on the inside, letting them through the barriers, letting them through the building. This all warrants an investigation. But what just happened was Trump just got impeached for something that he didn't do.
So do you think that the president shouldn't have been impeached?
Not at all. But really, I mean, this was a show trial because all the headlines today are the president's the first president in history to impeach twice. It has nothing to do with the facts of the matter. It has nothing to do with why they wanted to push forward with the impeachment. But again, as your colleague highlighted, what they're trying to do is to prevent him from ever running again. So it isn't even a matter of if he was complicit in any wrongdoing. They just want to stop him from running. So this was a show trial. It got the headline of being a second impeachment. And really all they're trying to do is to stop him from running again because of the success that he had in 2016 and pretty much through his whole tenure leading up to the COVID crisis.
I mean, even just speaking to you now, it gives a glimpse as to how divided America is. How does it move on the 20th of January when Joe Biden becomes president?
It's tough, and I get asked that question. I've been asked, what do people need to hear from Joe Biden? What do Trump supporters need to hear from Joe Biden? I don't think they need to hear anything. I think they need to see. Because I mean, really, America, regardless of which side you're on, they're tired of speeches and they want to see action. So it's a matter of, how is the government going to come together and try to appease as many people as they can on both sides of the aisle and every demographic, et cetera, et cetera. But carrying on these trials, coming up with, Trump supporter lists, shutting down communications for conservatives, et cetera, is certainly not helping anything.